Infernal Overdrive. That's what he said.
Hello,
Hi.
welcome to Story Time. How are you doing today? We are going to be telling a story. And then we are going, well, that story is going to be the Bible. Then we are going to read the last of Dragon Song.
What book are we going to read in the Bible?
We're going to be reading Daniel.
Why not the book of Jonathan?
Bro, there's no book.
Oh, there is no book of Jonathan. He has some Bible knowledge. I see one person on. Who's on?
Hello. And then after Dragon Song, we're going to be having a mystery book beginning. You won't know until.
No, I think they're doing book 2. Here, actually, hand me that blue book. So we actually found it. It was in Daniel's room. This is the whole trilogy. So I think the plan is to just keep going. Dragon Singer, and then after that is Dragon Drums. So, all right, that's what we have to look forward to. Hopefully we finish that before I have to leave. All right, so like JJ said, we're going to be reading from the book of Daniel, and excuse me. I told you guys yesterday that I would be doing a little bit of research to find out about the Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrianism is an ancient religion. I see one person on. Hi. And it follows a person named Zoroaster, or his name was also called Zarathustra, which there's actually a book by Nietzsche called Thus Spake Zarathustra, and I think it was Richard Strauss wrote a tome poem about it also. So anyway, that's obviously in modern-ish art with Nietzsche and Richard Strauss, but Zarathustra or Zoroastrianism, a lot of people claim that they stole a lot of ideas from the Old Testament from Zoroastrianism, but I looked it up and it didn't really come about until about the 5th century BC, which is before the exile, not after. So, oh, hi, Granny Bear. I was just explaining about Zoroastrianism. I hope this is interesting. Anyway, no, I don't want to start over, but she can start over if she wants to later. Anyway, it was before the exile, not after. And so all the claims that they have about Judaism stealing all of their thoughts from Zoroastrianism is completely bogus. Of course, those same people try to find ways to cleverly redate some of the Old Testament books or the writing of them. Things like Daniel, because Daniel is a prophetic book, and a lot of the things that that are talked about in Daniel happened in the succeeding centuries after Daniel passed away. And so they try to claim that the book of Daniel wasn't actually written until after Alexander the Great. And there is proof that Daniel was written before Alexander the Great. And I won't get into that today, exactly what the proof is, but we are going to read one of the prophetic chapters of the book of Daniel. This is chapter 2, in which we're going to talk about a dream that the king of Babylon had. Here we go. This is the English Standard Version, and spell it. What am I spelling, Granny Bear? Zoroastrianism. Okay, just a minute. Z-O-R-A-S-T. Zoroaster. No. I don't know. More to follow. I'll look it up and let you know. Zoroastrianism. Yeah. Okay. Not much, but it could be a life form. Oh, Granny Bear's got it. There you go. All right, so here's chapter 2, and that is the religion that they had, actually not necessarily in Babylon, but for sure in Persia, um, probably right around this time. So anyway, all right, sorry, ramble. Now I'll get on to Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, because that's the language that they spoke in Babylon at that time, and it's also the language that Jesus spoke when he was alive, probably. So the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servant the dream, and we will show the interpretation. So this is sort of like the king in Egypt when Joseph was there, and he wants them to interpret it. Nobody can interpret it. So the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. So Nebuchadnezzar wants them to tell them what he dreamed about and interpret it for him. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king who, I read the same line, no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. They had the all powerful creator god was Ahura Mazda or something like that. Anyway, all right. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men in Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, no wise man, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king. And that you may know the thoughts of your mind. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall rise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things, and like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. As you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face. Remember, this is not a Christian king or a Jewish king. Fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court. That's the end of chapter 2. It is a little bit long. There's a lot to unpack there. I wish we had more time to go over it, but we are already way over time for the Bible reading. So I am going to leave it there. So here's Kimberly with the synopsis.
I noticed the dad said prefect, and I can't help but thinking of Harry Potter.
All right.
Yes, eat more chicken to save the cows. Ha ha. So what happened in the last chapter was basically the people, I keep forgetting the name of the hold, but the people at the other hold that saved Melanie, they basically, after a while of them fixing her up, they found out about her 9 fire lizards. And like fire lizards have become like a new pet, I guess. Yeah, like just about a lot of people have them. So then what happened after that was you see they started singing, and she was like, "Oh wait, I can hum now. I'm not going to get in trouble." So she started humming along, and um her friend told her that like the harmony that she had was like so amazing. So she and the harper like did it like that. And so after a little while, her dragons, sorry, fire lizards, her fire lizards started singing along with her. So and then everybody was quiet and listened to her fire lizard sing. Yeah, 31 eggs. They found a clutch with 31 eggs over by the shore, like that clutch that Melanie had found earlier that was still soft. Yeah. And I'll hand it over to Mom.
Okay.
Hey Mom, you should read chapter 1 of the
We're going to be hard
This
pressed
one.
to finish this book today. So,
Okay.
I was going to say something and then I forgot what it was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, you'll have to excuse me. It's been a very long day and I'm kind of really tired. Bad hair day as well. So, all right, chapter 12, Dragon
Talk
Song.
about bad hair day.
Nah. Okay, chapter 12, Dragon Song by Anne McCaffrey. Dragon man, between thee and thine, share me that glimpse of love greater than mine. Miriam rose mentally early the next morning, impatiently shushing the fire lizards who hissed at her rough shaking of their mistress. Mentally, wake up. We need every hand in the kitchen. The egg will hatch today, and half Perns invited. Turn over. Menora's coming to look at your feet. Ouch, you're too rough. Tell Beauty, ouch, I'm not hurting you. Beauty, behave or I'll tell Ramuth. To Mentally surprised, Beauty stopped diving at Miriam and retreated with a squeak to the far corner of the room. You were hurting me, said Mentally, too sleepy to be tactful. Well, I said I was sorry. Your feet really do look a lot better. We won't use such heavy bandages today, said Menora, entering at that moment. The slippers give enough protection. Mentally craned her head about as she felt Menora's strong, gentle fingers first turn one foot and then the other. Yes, lighter bandages today, Miriam, and salve. Tonight, no bandages at all. Wounds must have fresh air, too, you know. But you've done a good job. The fire lizard eggs are fine this morning, Mentally. With that, she left, and Miriam quickly set about dressing the feet. When she'd finished and mentally rose to put on her clothes, her fingers lingered in the soft folds of the overshirt. Miriam sank onto the bed with an exaggerated sigh. Long day. What's the matter with you? Menelly asked. I'm getting all the rest I can while I can, Miriam replied. You don't know what a hatching is like, with all those holders and crafters stumbling about the weir, poking here and there where they're not supposed to be, and getting scared of all of and scaring the dragons and the weirlings and the hatchlings. And the way they eat, Miriam rolled her eyes expressively. You'd think they'd never seen food at all. Miriam flopped over on the bed and started to sob wildly. Miriam, what's the matter? Oh, it's Breck. Isn't she all right? I mean, won't she re-impress? Sandra said that's what Lessa hoped. Mentally bent to comfort her friend, herself upset by those heart-rending sobs. Miriam's words were garbled by her weeping, although mentally gathered that Miriam didn't want her foster mother to re-impress, and the reason was obscure. Breck didn't want to live, and they had to find some way to make her. Losing her dragon was like losing half herself, and it hadn't been Breck's fault. She was so gentle and sensible, and she loved Fenor, and for some reason that was unwise too. Mentally just let Miriam cry, knowing how much relief she had felt the day before when she'd wept, and hoping deep in her heart that there might be joyful tears too, for Miriam later that day. There had to be. She forgave Miriam all her little poses and attitudes, aware that was how Miriam had masked her intense anxiety and grief. There was a rattling of the cubicle's curtain, a squabble of fire lizard protest, and then Miriam's Tolly crawled under the curtain, his eyes whirling and with indignation and worry. He saw Menelly stroking Miriam's hair and raising his wings, made as if to launch himself at her when Beauty warbled sharply from the corner. Tolly sort of shook his wings, but when he leaped to the bed, he landed gently on the edge and remained there, his eyes first on Miriam and then Menelly. A moment later, the two greens entered. They settled themselves on the stool, watchful but not obtrusive. Beauty in her corner kept an eye on them all. Miriam, Miriam, it was Sandra's voice from the living cavern. Miriam, haven't you finished Menelly's feet yet? We need both of you now. As Menelly rose obediently, Miriam caught her hand and squeezed it. Then she rose, shook her skirts out, and marched from the cubicle, Menelly following more slowly behind her. Miriam had by no means exaggerated the amount of work to be done. It was just past sunrise, but obviously the main cooks had already been up for hours, judging by the breads, sweet, spiced, and sour, cooling on long tables. Two weirmen were trussing a huge herd beast for the main spit, and at the smaller hearths, wild wherries were being cleaned and stuffed for roasting later. For added protection in the busy kitchen, someone had placed the small table over her fire lizard egg basket. Oh, yeah. They were doing fine, the sand nice and warm all around. Felina caught sight of her, told her to feed herself quickly from the sauce hearth, and did she know anything flavorful to do with dried fish, or would she prefer to help pare roots? Menelly instantly elected to cook fish, so Felina asked what ingredients she'd need. Menelly was a little dismayed to learn the quantity she'd have to prepare. She'd had no idea that so many people came to a hatching. The number coming was more than lived at Half Circle Seahold. The knack in making the fish stew tasty was in the long baking, so Menelly applied herself to prepare the huge pots quickly, to give them enough time to simmer into succulence. She did so with such dispatch that there was still plenty of roots left to spare. Excitement filled the air of the kitchen cavern. The mound of root vegetables in front of Menelly melted away as she listened to the chatter of the other girls and women. There was great speculation as to which of the boys and the girls for the queen egg would impress the dragons to be hatched that day. No one has ever re-impressed a dragon, said one woman wistfully. Do you think Breck will? No one's ever been given the chance before. Is it a chance we should take? Asked someone else. We weren't asked, said Sandra, glaring at the last speaker. It's Les's idea, but it wasn't Fenor's or Minora's. Something has to help her, said the first woman. It tears my heart to see her lying there, just lying, like the undead. I mind me of the way Dinamal went. He sort of, well, faded completely away. If you'll finish that root quickly, we can put this kettle on, said Sanra, briskly rising. With all of this to be eaten? Asked Melanie of the woman beside her. Yes, indeed, and there'll be some looking for more, she said with a complacent smile. Impression days are good days. I've a fosterling and a blood son on the hatching ground today, she added with understandable pride. Sanra, she turned her head to shout over her shoulder, just one more largish kettle will take what's left. Then white roots had to be sliced finely, covered with herbs, and placed in clay pots to bake. The succulent odors of Menelie's fish concoction aroused compliments from Felina, who was in charge of the various hearths and ovens. Then Menelie, who was told to keep off her poor feet, helped decorate the spiced cakes. She giggled with the rest when Sanra distributed pieces of one cake about, saying they had to be certain the bake had turned out well, didn't they? Menelie did not forget to turn the fire lizard eggs or to feed her friends. Beauty stayed within sight of Menelie, but the others had been bathing in the lake and sunning themselves, scrupulously avoiding Raymeth, whose bugles punctuated the morning. She's always like that on Impression Day, Tagellin told Menelie as he grabbed a quick bite to eat at her table. Say, will you get your fire lizards to hum along with you again this evening? I've been called a liar because I said you'd taught them to sing. They might turn difficult and shy in front of a lot of people, you know. Well, we'll wait till things get quiet and then we'll give it a try, huh? Now, I'm to see you get to the hatching. Mid-afternoon, I'd say, to be ready. As it happened, she wasn't. She felt the thrumming before she heard it. She and everyone else in the cavern stopped working as one by one they became aware of the intensely exciting noise. Mentally gasped because she recognized it as the same sort of sound the fire lizards had made when their eggs had hatched. There was suddenly no time for her to return to her cubicle and change. Tagellin appeared at the cavern entrance, gestured urgently to her. She made as much speed as her feet would permit because she could see Monarth waiting outside the entrance. Tagellin had already taken her hand when she exclaimed over the cooking stains and white marks on her overshirt. I told you to be ready. I'll put you in a corner, pet. Not that anyone will notice stains today, Tagellin reassured her. A trifle resentful, Menelie noticed that he had dressed in new dark trousers, a handsomely overstitched tunic, a belt worked with metal and jewels, but she didn't resist. I have to get you in place first because I'm to collect some visitors, Tagellin said, climbing nimbly into place in front of her on Monmouth's neck ridges. Villars filling the hatching ground with anyone who will ride a dragon between. Monarch was awing, slanting up from the bowl floor to an immense opening high up on the rear wall, which Menelie had not noticed before. Other dragons were angling toward it too. Menelie gasped as they entered the mouth, with a dragon before them and one abaft, so close that she had momentary fears of collision. The dark core of the tunnel was lit at a far end, and abruptly they were in a gigantic hatching ground. The whole north quadrant of the weir must be hollow, thought Menelie, awed. Then she saw the gleaming clutch of dragon eggs and gasped. Slightly to one side was a larger egg, and hovering over it was the zealous golden form of Raymeth, her eyes incredibly brilliant with the coming of impression. Monarch dropped with distressing abruptness, then back-winged to land neatly on a ledge. Here you are, Menelie. Best seat in the ground. I'll be back for you afterwards. Menelie was only too glad to sit still after that incredible ride. She was in the third tier by the outer wall, so she had a perfect view of the hatching ground and the entrance through which people were beginning to file. They were all so elegantly dressed that she brushed vainly at the stains and crossed her arms over her chest. At least the clothes were new. Other dragons were arriving from the upper entrance, depositing their passengers, often 3 and 4 at a time. She watched the now steady stream of visitors coming in from the ground entrance. It was amusing to watch the elegant and sometimes overdressed ladies having to pick up their heavy skirts and run in awkward little steps across the hot sands. The tiers filled rapidly, and the excited thrumming of the dragons increased in pitch so that Menelie found it difficult to sit quietly. A sudden cry announced the rocking of some of the eggs. Late arrivals began to hurry across the sands, and the seats beyond Menelie were filled with a group of mines craftsmen, to judge from their red-brown tunic devices. She crossed her arms again and then uncrossed them because she had to lean forward to see around the Minecraftmen's stocky bodies. More eggs were rocking, all of them except the smallish gray egg that had somehow got shoved back against the inside wall. Another rush of wings, and this time bronze dragons entered, depositing the girls who were candidates for the queen egg. Menelly tried to figure out which one was Breck, but they all looked very aware and healthy. Hadn't the weirwoman remarked that morning how Breck just lay like someone dead? The girls formed a loose but incomplete semicircle about the queen egg while Raymond hissed softly behind it. Young boys marched in now from the bowl, their expressions purposeful, their shoulders straight in the white tunics as they approached the main clutch. Menelly did not see Breck's entrance because she was trying to figure out which of the violently rocking eggs would hatch first. Then one of the miners exclaimed and pointed towards the entrance, to the slender figure stumbling, halting, then moving forward again, apparently insensitive to the hot sands underfoot. That would be the one, that would be Breck, he told his comrades. Dragon Rider said she'd be put to the egg. Yes, thought Menelly, she walks as if she's asleep. Then Menelly saw Minora and a man she didn't recognize standing by the entrance, as if they had done all they could to bring Breck to the hatching ground. Suddenly Breck straightened her shoulders with a shake of her head. She walked slowly but steadily across the sands to join the 5 girls who waited by the golden egg. One girl turned and gestured for her to take the space that would complete the semicircle. The humming ceased so abruptly that a little ripple of reaction ran through those assembled. In the expectant silence, the faint crack of a shell was clear, and the pop and shatter of others. First one dragonet, then another. Awkward, ugly, glistening creatures flopped and rolled from their casings, squawking and crealing, their wedge-shaped heads too big for the thin, sinuous, short necks. Mentally noticed how very still the boys were standing, as stunned as she'd been in that very little cave with those tiny fire lizards crawling from their shells, voracious with hunger. Now the difference became apparent. The fire lizards had expected no help at their hatching. Their instinct was to get food into their churning empty stomachs as fast as possible. But the dragons looked expectantly about them. One staggered beyond the first boy, who sidestepped its awkward progress. It fell, nose first, at the feet of a tall, black-haired boy. The boy knelt, helped the dragonet balance on his shaky feet, looked into the rainbow eyes. Emotion like a fist squeezed Menelly's heart. Yes, she'd her fire lizards, but to impress a dragon. Startled, she wondered where Beauty, Rocky, Diver, and the others were. She missed them acutely, wanted Beauty's affectionate nuzzling, even the choke-tight twist of the little queen's tail about her neck. The crack of the golden egg was a summons for all attention to be centered on it. The egg split right down the center, and its inmate, protesting her abrupt birth, fell to the sand on her back. 3 of the girls moved to assist it. They got the little queen to her 4 legs and then stepped back. Mentally held her breath as they all turned towards Breck. She was unaware of anything. Whatever strength had sustained her to walk across the sands had now left her. Her shoulders sagged pathetically. Her head listed to one side as if too heavy to hold upright. The queen dragonet turned her head towards Breck, the glistening eyes enormous in the outsized skull. Breck shook her head as if aware of the scrutiny. The dragonet lurched forward 1 step. Mentally saw a bronze blur out of the corner of her right eye and for an unnerving moment thought it must be Diver. But it couldn't be because the little bronze just hung above the dragonet's head, screaming defiantly. He was so close to her head that she reared back with a startled shriek and bit at the air, instinctively spreading her wings forward as protection for her vulnerable eyes. Dragons bugled warnings from their perches at the top of the hatching ground, and Ramoth spread her wings, rising to her haunches as if to strike at the invader. One of the girls interposed her body between the queen and her small attacker. Bird, don't! Breck, too, moved her arm extended towards the irate bronze. The dragonet queen creeled and hid her face in the girl's skirt. The 2 women faced each other for a moment, tense, worried. Then the other stretched her hand out to Breck, and Mentally could see her smile. The gesture lasted only a moment because the young queen butted imperiously, and the girl knelt, her arms reassuringly encircling the dragonet's shoulders. At the same instant, Breck turned, no longer a somnolent figure immersed in grief. She walked back to the entrance of the cavern, the little bronze fire lizard whirring around her head, making noises that went from scolding to entreaty, just like Beauty when Menelly was doing something that had upset her. Menelly didn't realize that she was weeping until tears dropped from her arms. She glanced hastily to see if the miners had noticed, but they were concentrating on the main clutch. From their comments, it seemed that a boy had been found in search in one of their craft holds, and they were impatiently waiting for him to impress. For a fleeting moment, Menelly was angry with them. Hadn't they seen Breck's deliverance? Didn't they realize how marvelous that was? Oh, think how happy Miriam would be now. Menelly sank wearily back against the stones, depleted by the emotionally laden miracle, and the look on Breck's face as she passed under the arched entrance. Minora was there, her face radiant, her arms outstretched in a joyful gesture. The man, who was surely Fëanor, swept Breck up in his arms, his tired face mirroring his relief and gladness. A cheer from the miners beside her indicated that their lad had impressed, although Menelly couldn't be certain which of the boys he was. There were so many now paired off with wobbly-legged hatchlings, all creeling with hunger, lurching and falling towards the entrance. The miners were urging their favorite on, and when a curly-haired, skinny lad passed by with a grin for their cheering, she saw that he had done rather well, impressing a brown. When the exuberant miners turned to her to share their triumph, she managed to respond properly, but she was relieved when they scrambled down the tiers to follow the pair out of the hatching ground. She sat there, glowing over the resurgence of Breck, the determination and fierceness of Bronze Bird, his courage in braving Ramoth's ire at such a moment. Now why, Menelly wondered, didn't Bird want Breck to impress the new queen? At all events, the experiment had successfully roused Breck from her lethargy. The dragons were returning, landing in the hatching grounds so that their riders could help the weirlings, or to escort guests outside. The tiers were emptying. Soon was only a man in Holder colors on the first tier with two boys. The man looked as tired as she felt. Then one of the boys rose, pointing to the little egg on the sand that wasn't even rocking. Idly, Menelly thought it might not hatch, remembering the uncracked egg left in the fire lizard's sand nest the morning after her fire lizards had hatched. She'd shaken it and something hard had rattled within. Sometimes whole babies were born dead, so she supposed that it could happen to other creatures too. The boy was running along the tier now. To Menelly's astonishment, he jumped to the hatching ground and began kicking at the little egg. His cries and his actions attracted the notice of the weir leader and a small knot of candidates who had not impressed. The holder half rose, one hand extended in a cautionary gesture. The other boy was shouting at his friend. Jackson, what are you doing? Shouted the weir leader. The egg fractured then, and the boy began tearing at the shell, ripping out sections and kicking until Menelly could see the small boy pushing at the thick inner membrane. Jackson cut at the membrane with his belt knife, and a small white body, not much larger than the boy's torso, fell from the sack. The boy reached out to help the creature to his feet. Menelly saw the little white dragon lift his head, his eyes brilliant with green and yellows fastened on the boy's face. He says his name is Ruth, the boy cried in amazement and delight. With a strangled exclamation, the older man sank back on the stone seat, his face a mask of grief. The weir leader and the others, who had rushed to prevent what had just occurred, halted. To Menelly, it was all too obvious that Jackson's impression of the little white dragon was unprecedented and unwelcomed. And she couldn't imagine why. The boy and the dragon looked so radiant. Who could deny them their joyous union? Chapter 13. Harper, your song has a sorrowful sound, though the tune was written as gay. Your voice is sad and your hands are slow, and your eye meeting mine turns away. When it became obvious to Menelly that Tegelen had forgotten his promise to return, she slowly climbed down from the tiers and made her way out of the deserted hatching ground over the hot sand. Beauty met her at the entrance, demanding caresses and reassurance. She was swiftly followed by the others, all chittering nervously, with the many anxious dartings to the entrance to see if Ramoth was about. Although Menelly had not had far to walk on the sands, the heat had quickly penetrated the soles of her slippers. Her discomfort was acute by the time she stepped onto the cooler earth of the bowl. She glanced to one side of the entrance and sank down, her fire lizards grouping themselves around her while she waited for the pain to subside. As everyone was on the kitchen cavern side of the bowl, no one noticed her, for which she was grateful since she felt useless and foolish. It would be a long walk across the bowl to the kitchens. She'd just take it all in small sections. She heard the faint cries of the herd beasts at the farthest end of the bowl valley and saw Ramoth hovering for a kill. The weir woman had said that Ramoth hadn't eaten for the past 10 days, which was partly the cause of her irascible temper. Irascible. Irascible. By the lakeside, hatchlings were being fed and bathed, and their riders shown how to oil the fragile skin. Their white tunics stood out among the gleaming green, brown, blue, and bronze hides. The little queen was slightly removed from the others, with two of the bronze dragons in attendance. She couldn't see where the white dragon was. On the weir ledges, dotting the bull's face, some dragons were curled in what remained of the afternoon sun. Above and to the left of her, Menelaus saw great bronze Menmouth on the ledge of the queen's weir. He was seated on his haunches, watching his mate choose her meal. Menelaus saw him more slightly, glancing over his left shoulder. Then Menelaus caught a glimpse of a man's head as he descended the stairs from the queen's weir. Felina's voice, raised above the conversational babble, brought Menelaus' gaze back to the kitchen cavern where tables were being erected for the evening's feasting. The dragon riders were doing it, for the bright colors of their best tunics were conspicuous, moving about while the sober colors of hold and craft seemed to stay in stationary clumps at the polite distance from the workers. The man had reached the bowl floor now from the queen's weir, and Menelaus idly watched him start across. Auntie 1 and 2 came sweeping down to her, chittering about something that had excited them, and ducking their heads at her for reassurance. They needed to be oiled, and she felt guilty for not taking better care of them. "Do you have two greens?" asked an amused voice, and the tall man was standing in front of her, his eyes friendly and interested. "Yes, they're mine," she said, and held up two for him to inspect, responding to the kindness and good humor in his long face. "They like their eye ridges scratched gently like this," she added, showing him. He dropped to one knee on the sand and obligingly caressed two, who crooned and closed her eyelids in appreciation. Auntie 1 whistled at Menelaus for attention, digging a jealous claw into her hand. "Stop that, you naughty creature!" Beauty roused, and Rocky and Diver reacted as well, all three scolding Auntie 1 so fiercely that she took flight. "Don't tell me the queen and the two bronzes are yours as well?" the man asked, startled. "I'm afraid so." "Then you must be Menelaus," he said, rising to his feet and making such an elaborate bow that she blushed. "Lessa has just told me that I may have 2 eggs of that clutch you discovered. I'm rather partial to browns, you know, though I wouldn't actually object to a bronze. Of course, the greens, like this lady here," and he smiled with a winning smile to the watching two, who had crooned responsively, "are such delicate darlings. That doesn't mean that I would object to a blue, however." "Don't you want the queen?" "Ah, now, that would be greedy of me, wouldn't it?" He rubbed his face thoughtfully and gave her a wry half smile. "All things considered, though, I'd be hardly embarrassed if Cybele, my journeyman, is to have possession of the other egg. Secured a queen instead. But," and he threw his long-figured hand upwards to signify his submission to chance, "are you waiting here for some purpose, or is the confusion on the other side of the bowl too much for all your friends?" "I should be there. The clutch must be turned. The eggs are in warm sand by the hearth, but Tegelen brought me into the hatching cavern and told me to wait." "And seems to have forgotten you." "Not surprising considering today's surprises." The man hastily cleared his throat and extended his hand to her. She accepted his aid because she couldn't have risen without it. He had taken 3 strides when he realized that she wasn't keeping up with him. Politely he turned. Menelaus tried to walk normally, a feat she managed for about 3 strides when her heel came down so painfully on a patch of pebbles that she involuntarily cried out. Beauty whirled, scolding fiercely, and Rocky and Diver added their antics, which were of no help to anyone. Here's my arm, girl. Were were you too long on the hot sands? Oh, now wait. You're a long you're a long child, but there's no meat on your bones. I think he just said she was tall and skinny. Um, Before Meneley could protest, he'd swung her up into his arms and was carrying her across the bowl. Tell that queen of yours I'm helping you, he asked when Beauty disordered his silvering hair. Diving at him, after sober reflection, be sure you give me green eggs. Beauty was too excited to hearken to Meneley, so she had to wave her arms about his head and face to protect him. It was not astonishing then that their approach to the kitchen caverns attracted attention, but people made way so politely, bowing to them with such deference that Meneley began to wonder who the man was. His tunic was a gray cloth with just a band of blue, so he must be a harper of some sort, probably weir-bound to Fort Weir, to judge by the yellow arm device. Meneley, did you hurt your feet? Philina appeared before them, curious as at the flurry of excitement. Did Tygelen remember you? He's got no memory, drat that man. How good of you to rescue her, sir. Think nothing of it, Philina. I discovered she was custodian of the fire lizard eggs. However, if you happen to have a cup of wine, this is thirsty work. I can stand, really, I can, sir, Meneley protested, for something in Philina's manner told her that this man was too important to be toting sore-footed girls. Philina, I couldn't stop him. I'm only being my usual irritating self, the man told her, and do stop struggling. You're too heavy. Philina was laughing at his exaggeration as she led the way to Meneley's table above the egg basket. You're a terrible fellow, Master Robinson. Indeed you are. But you'll have your wine while Meneley picks out the best of the clutch. Have you spotted the queen egg, Meneley? After the way Meneley's queen has been attacking me, I'd be safer with any other color, Philina. Now, do get that wine for me. There's a good woman. I'm utterly parched. As he gently settled her into her chair, Meneley heard Philina's teasing remark, terrible fellow, Master Robinson, terrible fellow, Master Robinson. She stared at him, disbelieving. Now, what's the matter, Meneley? Did my exercise bring out spots on my face? He mopped at his cheeks and brow and examined his hand. Ah, thank you, Philina. You've saved my life. My tongue was quite stuck to the roof of my mouth. And here's to you, young queen, and thank you for your courtesy. He raised his cup to Beauty, who was perched on Meneley's shoulder, her tail firmly entwined as she glared at him. Well, he asked kindly of Meneley. You're the master harper. Yes, I'm Robinson. He sounded quite casual about it. And I think you need some wine too. No, I couldn't. Meneley held up her hands in refusal. I get hiccups and go to sleep. She hadn't meant to say that either, but she had to explain why she was discourteous enough to refuse his cup. She was also acutely aware now of her stained overshirt, her sandy clothes and slippers, her complete disarray. This wasn't how she imagined her first meeting with the master harper of Pern, and she hung her head in embarrassment. I always advise eating before drinking, remarked Master Robinson in the nicest possible way. I shouldn't wonder, but that's half the problem right now, he added, and then raised his voice. This child is faint with hunger, Philina. Meneley shook her head, denying his suggestion and trying to forestall Philina, but she was already ordering one of the lads to bring Claw a basket of breads and a dish of sliced meats. When she was served, just as if she were one of the weir-women, she kept her head bent over her cup, blowing to cool the contents. Do you think there's enough here for a starving man? Asked Master Harper Robinson, his voice so plaintive and faint with his pretended hunger that Meneley was startled into glancing up at him. His expression was at once so wistful, appealing, and kind that despite her deep chagrin, he smiled in response to his foolishness. I'll need strength for this evening's work and a base for my drinking, he added in a very quiet, worried voice. She had the feeling that he had let her share his responsibilities, but she wondered at the sadness and anxiety. Surely everyone in the weir was happy today. A few slices of meat on a slab of that good bread, and Robinson made his voice quaver like a peevish old uncle's, and his voice returned to his normal baritone range. A cup of good Bendon wine to wash it down. To her consternation, he rose then, bread and meat in one hand, the wine mug in the other. He bowed to her with great dignity and with a smile was off. But Master Harper, your fire lizard eggs. Later, mentally, I'll come back later for them. His tall figure, his head visible above the bustling activity, retreated across the cavern away from her. She watched until he was out of sight amid the visitors, bewildered, and all too keenly aware that there was no way in which she would be able to ask Master Harper Robinson about her songs. Twiddles they were, as Giannis and Mavi had always said, too insignificant to be presented for serious consideration to such a man as Master Harper Robinson. Beauty crooned softly and head stroked Menelie's cheek. Rocky hopped down from his wall perch to her shoulder. He nuzzled her ear, humming in a consoling tone. Miriam found her that way, and she she roused from her apathy to rejoice with her friend. Oh, I'm so very happy for you, Miriam. You see, it did come right. If Miriam, with all her worries, had been able to keep a good face, surely Menelie, with much to be grateful for, could manage to follow her example. Did you see it? You were in the hatching ground. I was so terrified that I didn't dare watch, Miriam said, no trace of terror now in her radiant face. I made Breck eat the first food she's taken in just days, and she smiled at me, mentally. She smiled at me, and she knew me. She's going to be perfectly all right. And Fenor ate every speck of the roast weary I brought him. She giggled. All mischievous girl, not Miriam Felina or Miriam Minora. I snitched the best slices of the sliced weary beast too, and you know he ate every bit of it. He'll probably eat himself sick at the feast as well. Then I told him to take poor Canth down to feed because that dragon's just about transparent with hunger. Her voice dropped in awe. Canth tried to protect Wirith and Prideth, you know. Can you imagine that? A Brown protecting a queen. It's because Fenor loves Breck so. And now it's all right. It's well and truly all right. So tell me. Tell you what? Irritation flashed across Miriam's face. Tell me exactly what happened when Breck got to the hatching ground. I told you I didn't dare look myself. So Meneley told her and told her again until she ran out of answers to all the detailed questions Miriam found to ask her. Now you tell me why everyone's so upset about this Jackson impressing the little white dragon. He saved his life, you know. The dragon would have died if Jackson hadn't broken the shell and cut the sack. Jackson impressed a dragon? I didn't know. Miriam's eyes widened with consternation. Oh, now why would that kid do such a dreadful thing? Why is it dreadful? Because he's got to be Lord Holder of Rotha Hold, that's why. Meneley was a bit annoyed with Miriam's impatience and said so. Well, he can't be Lord Holder and Dragon Rider. Didn't you learn anything in that sea hold of yours? And by the way, I saw the half circle harper. I think his name is Elgian. Shall I tell him you're here? No. Well, no need to bite my head off. And with that, Miriam flounced off in a huff. Meneley, will you forgive me? I completely forgot to come back for you, Tegelen said, striding up to the table before Meneley had a chance to catch her breath. Look, the Master Harper is supposed to have 2 eggs. He can't stay for the whole feast, so we've got to fix something for him to carry the eggs home in. And the rest of the eggs as well. No, don't get up. Here, you come to be feet for Meneley, he ordered, beckoning to one of the wereboys. So Meneley spent most of that evening in the kitchen cavern sewing furry bags to carry eggs safely between. But she could hear all the jollity outside, and with no small effort she made herself enjoy the singing. 5 harpers, 2 drummers, and 3 pipers made music for the Impressions feast. She thought she recognized Algian's strong tenor in one song, but it was unlikely he'd look for her at the back of the kitchen cavern. His voice made her briefly homesick for sea winds and the taste of salty air. Briefly, too, she longed for the solitude of her cave. Only briefly. This weir was the place for her. Her feet would heal soon. She'd no longer be old Auntie's sit by the fire. So how would she make her place in the weir? Valina had enough cooks, and how often did the weir used to meet when it wished want to eat fish? Even if she knew more ways of preparing it than anyone else. When she came down to it, the only thing in which she excelled was gutting fish. No, she would not think about harpering any more. Well, there had to be something she could do. Are you Meneley? Asked a man tentatively. She looked up to see one of the mine's craftsmen who'd she who'd shared her tear at the impression. I'm Nakat, Master Miner of Crom Hold. Werewoman Lessa said that I was to have 2 fire lizard eggs. Beyond his stiff manner, Meneley could see he was restraining an eager impatience to hold fire lizard eggs of his own. Indeed, I have, sir, right here, she said, smiling warmly at him and indicating the table protected basket. Well, my word, and his manner thawed visibly. You're taking no chances, are you? He helped her move the table and watched anxiously as she brushed back the top layer of sand and exposed the first of the eggs. Could I have a queen egg? He asked. Master Niket, Lessa explained to you that there's no way of telling which is which among the fire lizard eggs, said Tigellin, joining them to Meneley's intense relief. Of course, Meneley might have a way of telling. She might? Master Miner Nikat regarded her with surprise. She's impressed 9, you know. 9? Master Nikat frowned at her now, and she could practically read his mind. 9 for a child and only 2 for the Master Miner. Pick Master Nikat 2 of the best, Meneley. We don't want him to be disappointed. Although Tigellin's face was sober, Meneley caught the expression in his eyes. She managed to conduct herself with proper dignity and made a play of picking out just the right eggs for Master Miner Nikat, all the while being certain in her own mind that the queen egg was going to Master Harper Robinson only. Here you are, sir, she said, handing Master Miner Nikat the furry pouch with its precious contents. You'd best carry them in your riding jacket against your skin on the way home. Then what do I do? Master Nikat asked with humility as he held the sack in both hands against his chest. Meneley looked at Tigellin, but both men were looking at her. She gulped. Well, I'd do exactly what we're doing here. Keep them near the hearth in a strong basket with either hot sand or furs. The werewomen said they'd be hatching in about a 7-day. Feed them as soon as they break their shells, as much as they can eat, and talk to them all the time. It's important to... She faltered. How could she tell this hard-faced man that you had to be affectionate and kind? You must reassure them constantly. They're nervous when they're first hatched. You saw the dragons today. Touch them and stroke them. The Master Miner, was nodding as he catalogued her instructions. They must be bathed daily, and their skins must be oiled. You can always tell when a crack is developing from scaly patches on the hide, and they keep scratching themselves. Master Nikat turned questioningly at Tigellin. Oh, Meneley knows what to do. Why, she has her fire lizard singing tunes along with her, and all. Tigellin's airy assurance did not sit too well with the Master Miner. Yes, but how do you get them to come to you? He asked pointedly. You make them want to come back to you, Meneley said so firmly that she rated one of the miner's daunting frowns. Kindness and affection, Master Nikat, are essential ingredients, Tigellin said with equal force. Now I see that Tigran is waiting to escort you and your fire lizards back to Crom, and he led the Master Miner off. When Tigellin returned to Meneley, his eyes were dancing. I'll wager you my new tunic that one won't keep a fire lizard. Cold clawed, that's what he is, numbwit. You shouldn't have said that about my fire lizard singing with me. Why not? Tigellin was surprised at her criticism. Miriam hasn't done that much with her 3, and she's had them longer. I told, yes, Craftmaster Fallard did indeed say that you've to have a fire lizard egg. And so the evening went, with lucky, eager holders and craftsmen arriving to collect the precious fire lizard eggs. By the time Master Harper Robinson's eggs remained in the warm sands of the basket, Meneley had become resigned to hearing Tigellin's wheeze that she had taught her fair of fire lizards to sing. Fortunately, no one asked her to put it to the test, since her weary friends were curled up on their wall perches. They hadn't roused from sleep for all the singing and laughter at the merry tables in the bowl. Harper Elgin was thoroughly enjoying the impression of the feast. He hadn't realized how dour half-circle hold was until this evening. Giannis was a good man, a fine sea-holder to judge by the respect his holders accorded him, but he certainly knew how to take the joy out of living. When Elgin had sat in the hatching ground watching the young boys impress, he determined that he'd find a fire lizard clutch of his own. That would alleviate the gloom in Half Circle, and he'd see that Alamai got an egg too. He'd heard from his neighbors in the tears that the clutch being distributed this evening to the fortunate had been found down the coast from Half Circle Seahold by Tegelen. Elgin had promised himself a chat with the bronze dragon rider, but Tegelen had had 2 passengers aboard Monarth when he'd collected Elgin at Half Circle, so there'd been no opportunity to talk. Elgin hadn't seen the man since the hatching, but he'd bide his time. Meanwhile, Orharan, the weir harper, had Elgin playing guitar with him to amuse the visitors. Elgin had just finished another tune when Orharan and some of the other visiting harpers, when he caught sight of Tegelen, assisting a craftsman to mount a green dragon. It was then that Elgin noticed that the visitors were thinning out and this rare evening was drawing to a close. He'd speak with Tegelen and then seek out the master harper too. Over here, man, he said, beckoning to the bronze rider. Oh, Elgin, a cup of wine, please. I'm parched with talking. Not that it'll do those cold clods much good. They've no feeling for fire lizards at all. I heard you found the clutch. It wasn't in that cave by the Dragonstones, was it? By the Dragonstones? No. Way down the coast, in fact. Then there wasn't anything there? Elgin was so bitterly disappointed that Tegelen gave him a long look. Depends on what you were expecting. Why? What did you think would be in that cave if it didn't hold fire lizards? Elgin wondered briefly if he would be betraying Alamai's confidence, but it had become a matter of his professional honor to know if the sounds he'd heard from the cave had been made by pipes. The day Alamai and I saw the cave from the boat, I could have sworn I heard pipes. Alamai insisted it was wind over blowholes in the cliff, but there wasn't that much wind that day. No, Tegelen said, seeing a chance to tease the harper. You heard pipes. I saw 'em when I searched the place. You found pipes? Where, where was the player? Sit down. Why are you so excited? Where's that player? Oh, here at Bendenwire. Elgin sat down again, so deflated and disappointed that Tegelen forbore to tease him further. Remember the day we rescued you from Thread? Tigran brought someone in as well. The lad? That was no lad. That was a girl, Menely. She'd been living in the cave. Now, what's the matter? Menely? Here? Safe? Where's the Master Harper? I've got to find Master Robinson. Come, Tegelen. Help me find him. Elgin's excitement was contagious. All right. And though he was mystified, Tegelen joined the search. Taller than the young harper, Tegelen spotted Master Robinson in deep conversation with Minora at a quiet table in the bowl. Sir, I've found her, Elgin cried, dashing up to them. Have you now? The love of your life? Asked Master Robinson amiably. No, sir, I've found Petrion's apprentice. Her? The old man's apprentice was a girl? Elgin was gratified by the Master Harper's surprise and grabbed at his hand, quite prepared to drag the man after him to search her. She ran away from the Seahold because they wouldn't let her make music, I think. She's Alamai's sister. What was what What's this about Menely? Asked Minora, obstructing Elgin's flight with the harper. Menely? Robinson raised his hand to silence Elgin. That lovely child with the 9 fire lizards? What do you want of Menely, Master Robinson? Minora's voice was so stern that the harper was brought up sharp. He took a deep breath. My much respected Minora, old Petrion sent me 2 songs written by his apprentice, 2 of the loveliest melodies I've heard in all my turns of harpering. He asked were they any good. Robinson raised his eyes heavenward for patience. I sent word back immediately, but the old man had died. Elgin found my message unopened when he got to the Seahold, and then he couldn't find the apprentice. The Seaholder gave him some folderol, Folderol. Somebody define that, please. About a fosterling who'd returned to his own hold. What's distressing you, Minora? Menely, I knew something had broken the girl's heart, but not what. She may not be able to play, Master Robinson. Miriam says there's a dreadful scar on her left hand. She can too play, said Tegelen and Elgin together. I heard the sound of multiple pipes coming from that cave, Elgin said hurriedly. I saw her hide those pipes when we cleared out her cave, Tegelen added. And furthermore, she's taught her fire lizards to sing too. Has she? Bright sparks lit the Master Harper's eyes, and he turned purposefully toward the kitchen cavern. Not so fast, Master Harper, said Minora. Go softly with that child. Yes, I saw that too when we were chattering this evening, and now I understand what was inhibiting her. So, how to proceed cautiously? The Master Harper frowned and gazed at Tagellin so long that the bronze rider wondered what he'd done wrong. How do you know she's taught her fire lizards to sing? Why, they were singing along with her and Ohoran last night. Now that's very interesting. Here's what we shall do. Meneley was tired now, and most of the visitors had left. Still, the Master Harper did not appear to collect his fire lizard eggs. She wouldn't leave until she'd seen him again. He'd been so kind. She hugged to herself the memory of their meeting. It was hard for her to believe that the Master Harper of Pern had carried her, of Meneley of the Nine Fire Lizards. She propped her elbows up on the table and rested her head on her hands, feeling the rough scar against her left cheek and not even minding that it would that at that moment. She didn't hear the music at first. It was soft, as if Oharan was playing to himself at a nearby table. Would you sing along with me, Meneley? Asked Oharan softly, and she looked up to see him taking a place at the table. Well, no harm in singing. It would help keep her awake until the Master Harper arrived. So she joined in. Beauty and Rocky roused at the sound of her voice, but Rocky went back to sleep after a peevish complaint. Beauty, however, dropped down to Meneley's shoulder, her sweet soprano trill blending with Meneley's voice. Do sing another verse, Meneley, said Minora, emerging from the shadows of the darkened cavern. She took the chair opposite Meneley, looking weary, but sort of peaceful and pleased. Oharan struck the bridging chords and started the second verse. My dear, you have such a restful voice, Minora said, when the last chord died away. Sing me another one, and then I'm away. Meneley could scarcely refuse, and she glanced at Oharan to see what she should sing. Sing this one along with me, the weir harper said, his eyes intent on Meneley's, with his fingers struck an opening chord. Meneley knew the song, which had such an infectious rhythm that she began to sing before she realized why it was so familiar. She was also tired and not expecting to be trapped, not by Oharan and certainly not by Minora. That's why she didn't realize at first what Oharan was playing. It was one of the two songs she jotted down for Petrion, the ones he'd said he'd sent to the Master Harper. She faltered. Oh, don't stop singing, Meneley, Minora said. It's such a lovely tune. Maybe she should play her own song, said someone standing just behind Meneley in the shadow, and the Master Harper walked forward, holding out his own guitar to her. No, no, Meneley half rose, snatching her hands behind her back. Beauty gave a startled squawk and twined her tail around Meneley's neck. Won't you please play it for me? Asked the harper, his eyes entreating her. Two more people emerged from the darkness. Tagellin, grinning fit to crack his face wide open, and Elgian. How did he know? From the gleam in his eyes and his smile, he was pleased and proud. Meneley was frightened and hid her face in confusion. How neatly she had been tricked. Don't be afraid now, child, said Minora quickly, catching Meneley's arm and gently pressing her back into her chair. There's nothing for you to fear now, for yourself or your rare gift of music. But I can't play. She held up her hand. Robinson took it in both of his, gently fingering the scar, examining it. You can play, Meneley, he said quietly, his kind eyes on hers, as he continued to stroke her hand, much as she would have caressed her frightened beauty. Elgian heard you when you were playing the pipes in the cave. But I'm a girl, she said. Giannis told me. As to that, replied the Master Harper somewhat impatiently, though he smiled as he spoke, if Petrion had sense enough to tell me that was what the problem was, you might have been spared a great deal of anguish, and I certainly would have been spared a great deal of trouble searching all Pern for you. Don't you want to be a harper? Robinson ended on such a wistful, distressed note that Meneley had to reassure him. Oh, yes, yes, I want music more than anything else in the world. On her shoulder, Beauty trilled sweetly, and Meneley caught her breath, sharply in distress. Now, what's the matter? Asked Robinson. I've got fire lizards. Lessa said I belong in the weir. Lessa will not tolerate 9 singing fire lizards in her weir, said the harper in a voice that brooked no contradiction. And they do belong in my harper hall. You've a trick or two to teach me, girl. He grinned down at her with such mischief dancing in his eyes that she smiled timorously back at him. Now, and he waggled a finger at her in mock seriousness, before you can think of any more obstacles, arguments, or distractions, will you kindly bundle up my fire lizard eggs, get whatever you have, and let us be off to the Harper Hall. This has been a day of many tiring impressions. His hand pressed hers reassuringly, and his kind eyes urged her acquiescence. All Menelie's doubts and fears dissolved in an instant. Beauty bugled, releasing the stranglehold of her tail about Menelie's neck. Beauty called again, rousing the rest of the fair, her voice echoing Menelie's joy. She rose slowly to her feet, her hand clinging to the Harpers for support and confidence. "Oh, gladly will I come, Master Robinson," she said, her eyes blurred by happy tears, and 9 fire lizards bugled a harmonious chorus of accord. The end of Dragon Song. And we managed to find this volume that has all 3. Oh, see, this is how well loved it is. There's a crack in it. It's well loved. Okay, Dragon Singer. Chapter 2. All right, Chapter 1 of Dragon Singer. We will try to start tomorrow. The first word is the.
So the first word is
Chapter. Okay. All right. And with that, I bid you good evening and adieu.
So I'm sorry that I ran too long on the Bible time and it made it an extremely long live stream. So I'm going to just end it here, and you guys have a good night and God bless you. And we will see you again next time for more of Anne McCaffrey and the Harper Hall of Pern. So God bless you. Have a good night.